Welcome, Left Reckoners. David here. Very excited to be talking a little bit about Florida and this exciting congressional campaign. I'm joined by Jen Perelman, who's running for U.S. Congress. You also may know Jen from Generational Change. Jen, how are you doing today?
I am so good. Thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited to be chatting with you. I mean, there's a kind of big elephant in the room that I can't ask you any other political questions about before.
Right.
Who are you running against?
So I am running in Florida's 25th district, and the incumbent is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And this is a primary challenge. And really, we're just so gerrymandered blue. We're just blue that it's just the only way to potentially do this. So running in any other way, like as an independent or a green or what, that there would be no point. So it has to be in a primary. But yeah, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
It's pretty, I mean, very much like the kind of generic bad Democrat candidate, frankly. I mean, so this is your second time running, and I know like Israel-Palestine is important. I think we're probably going to spend a good amount of time talking about that. But I mean, what has inspired you not just to run this time, but in the past, right? What were some of the other things that were really motivating you to feel like you want to jump into this race?
It's really, for me, very, very basic. Like the policy differences and all that is not really it's as simple as I think that representatives are supposed to be public servants. I think that political representation is a term of service. And we have someone there that's a career politician. She's been there for 20 years. She was in the state house, termed out of there. She's never done anything else but be a politician. And I don't think that's in our best interest. I think that, and the fact that she's extremely corporate, very beholden to different special interests. AIPAC is definitely, she's taken close to $1 million from AIPAC. So just in general, so when I ran in 20, it was really with this generalized idea that I cannot stand that my representative is bought and paid for. I just can't stand that. Like, it isn't any necessarily one policy, but we could talk about that too. I mean, they're definitely, she doesn't support single payer health care. She doesn't, she takes money from fossil fuel fracking and military industrial complex. She hasn't met a war she hasn't overfunded. So, I mean, policies were just totally different. But at the end of the day, if I thought that she was on our team in any capacity, then it wouldn't matter if we agreed on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that's interesting about this, about both of your campaigns, has been like the kind of timing of them. I mean, could you talk about, I was talking to Matt about this, and I'm just curious what your experience is. It's a weird election cycle. Because, the Democratic Party primary just seems so much of like a foregone conclusion. At this point, it's Joe Biden versus Trump. So like that entire primary season, like people start getting very excited about politics or following things a little bit closer. We've missed that, completely. I'm just curious, if that's been if you've been getting any sense of that during your campaign so far.
It is definitely unusual, like to be heading into a general election year and I'm in a primary and there's like no activity going on around me regarding the presidential race, but there isn't. But, also remember, I'm in a blue county in Florida. So they don't invest too much down here anyway, even though they said they were going to, which makes no sense to me. It feels different for sure. And one of the key things that I think it's important for people to notice, and I've been pointing this out for a long time, is the fact that the Democrats in general are very averse to the concept of primaries. And what I deal with here at the local level is a microcosm of, let's say, what RFK had. And I'm not saying that he and I are the same on policy, but what he was dealing with in trying to run in a primary where you're just completely ignored and discounted. And it's very, very challenging. And so if there's any strategic way to do it outside of that, it would make sense. So like, I get that. But the Democrats are not big on primaries. And I think it's very non-democratic.
Yeah, I mean, talking about anti-democratic things, I mean, let's talk a little bit about Israel and Palestine, because, it's something that's, a part of your campaign. It's a question you're getting asked a lot. And, I think maybe to get us started, can you sort of talk about your personal experience with that question and that issue?
Yeah, it's very personal to me. This is something that I actually realized a couple of years ago, I had sent my business partner, Peter Hager, I had sent him a clip or an Instagram, something of some little boy, something horrible had happened it was at the West Bank. And we even officially decided we're running again and all that. And I messaged him with this picture and I said, this is the hill I'm dying on now. And that was 2 years ago, maybe, you know, like it was a while ago. So the story for me is that I am Jewish. I was born and raised in North Miami Beach, Florida, in a Jewish community. It was very Zionist. It wasn't even where we were taught that we were Zionist. That was just part of our community, and our education was about Israel. It was all about Israel and moving to Israel, and Jews are not safe without Israel, and Israel and Israel. And so that was just very much part of my identity. And I loved Israel. Like, and the truth is, the land is amazing. The people, the culture, all of it. The only difference for me is when I was there, I had been lied to about that culture. So I definitely at some point would love to go back and see it, how it's supposed to be seen. But so I was raised Zionist, and it's taken me a long time. And I look at myself doing videos like this, and this is about me, that I'm 53. You know, I'm a cannabis user. You guys know this. So I have varied in saying from 10 years, I think it's been 15 years. Here's the thing. It was in the early 2000s, and it just always freaks me out when I'm like, okay, that's already 20 years. Like, so that's what it is. But so it was around the time of the second Intifada, and also the BDS movement. And what really got me looking into just the whole thing in general was unraveling the anti-BDS legislation here and feeling like, why would we need to be impeding on our First Amendment rights? Why is that, like, what's going on there? And then I just started digging and digging, because that's just how I am. And the whole thing fell apart like a house of cards. But even up until 2000, and even when I ran the first time, I still in my mind held out hope that there could be a two-state solution, right? Like, I had already come to terms with the reality of history and learning about the Nakba and the occupation. Like, I was already with that, right? But I wasn't really at the point where I just don't think we need a Jewish state. I don't agree with the idea of any ethno-state, period. So, but I wasn't ready to necessarily be proactive on that, let's say. And then a couple of years ago, it just started just really irking me, just different things. And look, it's not like I wasn't paying attention since, like, Netanyahu's been back and all of that, but yeah, and now I just feel like it's incumbent upon me as a former Zionist, as a Jewish person, to use my voice and use my credibility in that to speak up. But yeah, this is not what I anticipated 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I anticipated saying I'm running again, and then having AIPAC or, you know, other Debbie's people pulling up all the images of me saying I support, free Palestine, all that. So I knew I was going to have to go on the offense about where I was, but I never could have envisioned this. Like, this is not, I just knew the issue would be big regardless. And so what's going on now in some ways is a gift to me, because there are so many more motivated people to help me. That are getting really organized and involved because they're outraged, rightfully so. So, yeah.
Well, I was just wondering, I mean, to get your thoughts on this, because one of the things that I think has been really notable about this crisis, in addition to the kind of obvious, I mean, it's just amazing to see the political unity in a country that's very divided. The kind of political unity between, like, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party on this.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I think, has really exposed a lot of crises within our democracy. I mean, what we've seen with, college students all across the country, the way they've been attacked by the police, or the way that the police have sort of stood down as those students are being attacked. I mean, this goes beyond just the question of, like, Israel and Palestine, to basic questions of democracy. And, I was just wondering, both with your campaign and then, potentially with a win, how would you be sort of working, to defend these rights, of like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and being being able to take on, some of the moneyed interests, for example, that have been, support, trying to crack down on young folks for speaking out at their college campuses?
I've been loud about this from the get-go because, like I was just saying, how I even started down this rabbit hole was really when I noticed that the infringement on the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I take very seriously. So for me, and to me, hate speech is fine. I don't have a problem with hate speech. Hate crimes, yes. Hate speech, no. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I am pretty absolutist. I just am. I don't believe in deplatforming. I think everybody should be able to say whatever bigoted thing they want to say that comes out of their mouth, okay? So the fact that they're even accusing these encampments or these students of being anti-Semitic, which everybody knows that they're not, with the exception of some of the tools that only follow their media, whatever they follow. The rest of us in the world, people of all faiths, anybody who's been near any of these encampments and these movements know that they are absolutely nonviolent, that they are absolutely very peaceful. Like, we know this, that's not what that's about. So when you claim that these are things that are anti-Semitic and so on, we know that's just not true. So I think that they're painting it as that because they're really out of ideas. But any infringement on, point being, even if they were anti-Semitic, that's my point. Even if they were, because again, even if they were walking around saying, we hate Jews, we hate Jews, we hate Jews, it's not cool, I mean, but I like to know who my bigots are. So like that's neither here nor there, but we know they're not anti-Semitic. So, all of these things are violations of the entire principles of freedom of speech. And I understand people say, well, this is not government, blah, blah, blah. But we know what this is. I mean, and we know why it's being suppressed, and we know who's suppressing it. That's what's so interesting, is we can see the whole thing.
And, I mean, I think it'd be hard to make kind of private entity argument with a lot of these cases. I mean, here at the University of Texas, the governor gets involved. In New York City, the mayor's involved, right? It's not just, but I mean, it is one of those things that I think, they have to crack down on it in this way, because I think the demands of the students and folks are so clear. And, it's just like a ceasefire, and for these institutions that people are attending and participating in to stop funding genocide.
That's the key thing. That's the key thing. And I think that that's the most important thing. It's because the truth is what they are demanding is what is doable. They are demanding that level of accountability from the institution regarding its participation and complicity, right? So, we're all saying ceasefire because we want a ceasefire. But at the end of the day, that's not their demand to their university. The demand is divestment. The demand is divestment. So I think that it's one of those things that they and some of the universities are negotiating. And now those presidents are being called up before Congress to have to explain why they've decided to negotiate with the anti-Semites. And then there's these presidents are actually having this serious conversation with these people. I don't understand how they're having a serious conversation. I'm like, I couldn't even take those people seriously.
I mean, and, let's not forget too, you have grown people, harassing children, right? Which is just not to call everyone in college a child, but you know what I mean? It's massively inappropriate. But I mean, on the same issue, I mean, two quick questions here. Do you agree with calling what Israel's been doing a genocide? And also, what are your thoughts on the ICC potentially pursuing criminal charges against Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli government?
Yeah, I actually completely think this is a genocide. I've said it many, many times. That's actually my aversion to the use of the term ceasefire, actually, is because to me that implies that there's a war. And so and the same reason I don't like calling Gaza an outdoor prison, because that implies some sort of criminality, whereas I always say concentration camp. I feel like words matter. It's sort of how we end up writing history, is how we talk about it now. So I try to be very clear. It is absolutely a genocide. It was always intended to be a genocide. We're participating in the genocide. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was about the ICC pursuing criminal charges.
Yeah. So I believe the ICC, we are not a party to, but Israel is, correct?
I think Israel has impunity as well, right? Yeah.
No, I think that they're a party to it, and that's why. And not that it would matter, because that's the point. It doesn't matter. They could sign, and I would. Israel's lying when their lips are moving. So, like, I wouldn't trust any treaty with them anyway. But my thoughts on the ICC is that I wish it had real teeth. I wish that they could actually extradite and try these people for war crimes. I think that everybody that, in fact, that is in our Congress, I think any of the people that have agreed to send arms and support during this time are complicit in that. And it wouldn't bother me if they got arrested and tried at the International Criminal Court. That's what I think. But unfortunately, we seem to be immune from the International Criminal Court.
Yeah, I mean, so on this, I mean, there are, members of Congress who, have associations with the left, some of them DSA members. And there's been a lot of tension in the past at times with some of their votes. Sometimes I will also say, sometimes there's a bit of confusion, I will say, like amongst the left on what some of these members of Congress have done or voted. But there's no doubt about it that, when we're talking about members of the squad, right, there's kind of a mixed record with some of these folks on this particular issue. I'm curious, how one you might like relate, be interested if you were elected and sort of relating with that group, where you might be differing from them, and also, how you would be putting pressure on the Biden administration. I mean, basically, how would you be participating in politics and voting on this issue?
I envision that I would be a pretty much of a lone person in terms of a lot of things, because I am someone that will work with anyone to get anything done. Right? Like any of my missions, anything that I'm trying to get done. So if somebody agrees with me on X, even if they disagree with me on everything else, I'll work with that person to get that done. So, and I'm not somebody, I won't pick party over constituents. I'm not going to just get in line if somebody has a good idea on the other team. I'm not going to just say, no, they don't. And so I envision that I'm just going to have to stand ground and just be as clear and transparent as possible. That's all I can imagine doing. So I don't see myself as being in any group. I mean, if there was actually a progressive caucus, let's say that wherein the membership requirements is you couldn't take corporate or special interest money, and that was the sole components of that caucus, and it was actually a caucus of those people, then maybe that would have some element of camaraderie and power, but there isn't that. So I think that that's really what it is. On a case-by-case basis, depending on who takes money from where, is how effective you could be with any other one person. Or who's scared of whom, or who's scared of losing their seat, or who's scared of this, of the attack ads, or who's scared in line by this. I don't know.
Would you vote for a bill that continued funding the Iron Dome, for example?
No. I actually think we need to end all funding, any connection to any country that's in violation of international law. And what's interesting is we're in violation of international law, and I recognize the irony of that. But regarding foreign policy, to me, any country that has, or quite honestly, human rights violations that have been flagged by whatever group you want to, accredit it to, we should not be supporting or supplying any of that. So, yeah, and Israel to me is no exception.
Yeah, I mean, sort of on that, but switching gears a little bit. I mean, I think, tell me about how much this plays in Florida. I'm sure Republican districts certainly much more, but the southern border, or the border with Mexico, is a major issue. How would you describe your views on that? Compared to like Joe Biden, for example.
Oh my God. I mean, my views on it is that we should be having a federal jobs program and employing people to build facilities and housing at the border to house people while they figure their stuff out, treat people kindly, offer them food, maybe some education, maybe some hot showers. I have my thoughts about the road to citizenship are somewhat flexible in terms of if it's just for everyone and this is how we agree the process should be, then that's fine. We can discuss that. But how we treat people that's a whole different animal to me. And that is where we have lost our way. And we're going to sit there and fight about who and who's entitled to what. And we get everybody kicking down and punching down like it's the immigrants' problem. And it's not going to solve any of our problems. So for me, my thought, how I'm different, is I think we should be welcoming people in with open arms, offering them place of refuge, offering them some services so they could get on their feet. And I'm not saying you have to guarantee everyone's citizenship, you know, whatever your process is. But yeah, I don't believe in building walls as if that's going to keep out dangerous people, because it doesn't keep out the dangerous people. The dangerous people come in legally. That's something we know very well here in Florida, by the way. People think that people coming across the border are dangerous people that want to hurt us. No. No, the dangerous people that want to hurt us actually have resources, and they come in legally, and then they just either overstay or whatever, however they do it. But the people that really want to do us harm are not these people that are like desperate crossing the border with their families and like everything they own on their backs. Like, so yeah, I don't know what you would call that. I'm just going to say, I don't know. I believe in things like dignity for humans. At this point, I feel like this is a ridiculous conversation almost. Not with you personally, but just the way that we talk about this, like this is acceptable.
Well,
like,
I mean, one of the shocking things has been, for me, was how upset, and it was heartening to see how upset people were by the cruelty at the U.S. border. But once Joe Biden became president and effectively made permanent a lot of Donald Trump's border policies, it sort of ceased to be an issue, except for, you know, when Greg Abbott would do it, and, you know, then again, it's like Greg Abbott's doing it. And for me, it was really shocking seeing how, I don't know, political or partisan people's morality was on this issue. And the frightening thing for me, both as like, you know, just a person and as a Texan, is seeing a very likely reality that the cruelty at the border gets worse, not better, regardless of who wins the presidency in the next election. So, you know, I think it would be something that is absolutely critical for progressive Democratic Party, you know, congressional figures to be pushing.
Why? You know why this is a problem and why it doesn't matter who's president, because you know what the real problem is. The real problem is capital, and that's going to keep going in the direction that it's going, regardless of who's sitting in the White House. And the way capital functions is to keep us kicking down to the least of these. That's how it functions and keeps us divided, and also gets to screw with things like workforce and labor violations and all sorts of stuff globally. And we treat it. It's a way for us to create this sense of nationalism and othering of other people as if it isn't a global problem, how we treat workers. And, you know, so that's the ultimate problem with it, is that we look at it like, oh, because they're coming across this border, that they're somehow so different. No, we have infinitely more in common with them than the people that are the ones that are telling you not to like them. So it's just that I feel like that's what's incumbent upon us the most, is to try to get everybody to know where to assert their anger. Like, anger is very important. We have a lot of very righteous anger. I just want people to aim it in the correct direction.
Well, you know, some exciting things has been, you know, this march of the UAW across the South.
Yes.
You know, a recent setback, but, you know, again, very exciting, you know, just in general. You know, when it comes to supporting the labor movement, you know, what's the platform here? And also two specific questions. One, would you you know, join a picket line, a UAW picket line, for example? And two, you know, how would you use the office to pressure companies that are breaking labor law or are getting involved in the union election process?
Yeah, I haven't marched UAW. We don't have. I'm trying to think if we have that here. I've marched SEIU. We did Fight for 15 here. Yeah, I love a good picket line. And I'm big on people understanding that whether or not you're a union, what happens to unions and how unions are treated is like this huge direct impact on all other labor. And people need to understand that this isn't a union issue. It's a labor issue. Unions are not necessarily always acting in the best interest of rank and file. I can tell you that from personal experience and local endorsements. But when it comes to standing with labor, always. And that's the key thing. And I would love to see more of our members of Congress out walking with labor and using their platform. And even and I really don't know what they do at their local and state levels in terms of participating in labor stuff. I don't know. I know that would be something really important to me. I mean, Florida's right to work. So where our labor unions have been so decimated here anyway that I get excited for any activity to be happening. But yeah, I mean, we need to, I wanted to pass the PRO Act. I thought that was a good plan. I don't know what happened to that. Why aren't Democrats running on that? Why isn't anybody talking about that? What happened to the PRO Act? We need to get rid of right to work. So there's a lot of things that nobody seems to be remembering. Wasn't that a thing? I remember Joe talking about the PRO Act at some point. Did he mention it?
I mean, I think that the legislative priorities of the Democratic Party got deflated rather quickly.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, a couple of things that I want to make sure that we touched on. Though, and maybe you'll inspire me a little bit because I think a lot of folks are feeling very pessimistic about stuff like this. Could you talk about whether or not you support, some of the keystone parts of the Bernie Sanders platform, the Green New Deal and Medicare for all, and not only just how, whether or not you support them, but how can we get those kind of concepts back into the political mainstream? Because I feel like those are conversations that aren't happening as much anymore.
And actually, I'm glad you say this because this is something that is important to me that I'm working on. So I completely support universal single-payer healthcare. You can call it Medicare for all. I don't get stuck on the name of it, the brand of it. It doesn't matter. Single payer, no point of purchase, no deductible, no nothing. Everybody has healthcare, no middleman, no private for-profit insurance, whatever you want to call it, single payer. That to me is my number one. It's been my number one the longest because that is single payer healthcare would help the most amount of people in the quickest amount of time than any other single policy I believe would do. That's just me. I think that when you talk about not just the healthcare aspects, but the bankruptcy aspects, the debt aspects, like just how many lives that would affect. So yeah, I'm definitely with that. I no longer use phrase Green New Deal because it's just so amorphous and just massive. Like, what does that mean? So I'll just tell you, I support the idea of a 21st century economic bill of rights. And what the 21st century economic bill of rights is, and I would encourage people, go to my website, go to gen2024.org, and in our issue statements where I talk about this, there is a link to an article from Harvey Kaye and Alan Minsky about the idea of the 21st century bill of rights, which is based on FDR's original premise when, back before, and then he died, and then we didn't get the second part of what we're due. So it's the idea of everyone's entitled to health care, housing, clean environment, a living wage job, like all of these things that we're entitled to. And so for me, that is more how I explain it versus the idea of a Green New Deal per se. But when you look at it in terms of these are our rights to these things, then it becomes we could be more fluid onto how to achieve those things when we all agree we have a right to them. So I think that that's the first step. And that's something that I'm really big on. And I also really love the idea, and I've been a big proponent of the idea of a federal job guarantee. And that to me is one of those things that I know might be a little pie in the sky for people right now. But, 10 years ago, we weren't all talking about single payer. So I figure I got to put it out there. But the idea of a federal job guarantee that would essentially be what would set the living wage as opposed to minimum wage would be, to me, an infinitely better program. And there are lots of people who have written about this and how this can work. And I just think it makes the most sense. But so I put that out there. But so I don't know if that answers like what I'm about. But if you see everything that's in this 21st century economic bill of rights, you would probably think, yes, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And that information's on your website.
Yes.
Okay.
So everything, education, look, the things that we all know that we could have, and the only reason we don't have is because of greed. All of those things that other people can have are things we need to have. So whatever that, and right to clean water is important. We don't even have a right to clean water in this country. So those kinds of issues, I just feel it's better to approach it from that perspective than just say this giant omnibus policy package.
Well, in the last couple of minutes, could you talk a little bit about, the district itself and the coalition that you're hoping to be building there?
So this district is really interesting. And in some ways, I've lived here forever because I grew up just south of here. Where I grew up is no longer in this district, but it was for many years. So this is the southern part of Broward County. It's southwest of Fort Lauderdale. It's a blue district. It's, it's pretty solidly blue. The demographics have shifted significantly over the past 10 years, and then we just got redistricted. So right now, we're 46%, our district is 46% Latino, whereas 10 years ago, it would have been, you would have thought mostly Jewish, at least in terms of voters, at least in terms of like your voting populace, and it's changed. So a lot of things have shifted. And for a grassroots campaign, for us, it's shifted for the better in terms of our district lines. So I've spent the past 5 years basically working in this community, in this district. And I work in the communities that need the most help. I look at it like triage. So I've generally been we have a few communities in district like Liberia and Hollywood, like a few that are definitely our more vulnerable neighborhoods. And I've spent a considerable amount of time, helping and trying to come up with solutions and events and stuff for the kids in those with my friend who works on the ground over there. But just really knowing the different communities where the people need the most help. And that is something I've been working on the ground for about 5 years. And that's really what it comes down to. Like any neighborhood association, I know who's there. I know what their issues are. Just knowing what people need and showing up for them. It's amazing what that does. It's amazing what that does. And people they don't even necessarily get upset if you don't win. They just love somebody showing up for them on whatever it is. So that's something that I've been doing down here. We had a portion of residents in Dania Beach. There's a section of Dania Beach that it's sort of like the redheaded stepchild of Dania Beach. And it's over near the Seminole Casino. And it's this area that gets overlooked a lot. And this whole area is getting overrun by casino traffic, and nobody is standing up for these people. They're going to end up in a situation where, and a lot of them are older, where there's only one way in and one way out for an ambulance because of what they're blocking roads, like all this stuff. And they were having all these problems. And I just remember going with them to city hall meetings and just standing there and just being part of like this group of people that was showing up for these residents. And at the end of the day, they lost. They're going to, like that at the end of the day. But it's just people want you to show up for them and give a shit. Like it's really not that complicated. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's just not that complicated.
No. I mean, a lot of times nobody's talking to any of these communities. And it truly is the cause of a lot of particularly in districts that aren't fairly competitive or seemingly competitive from another party. It can get very one-sided very quickly.
It does, and the thing about it is that, and I do acknowledge that, like, there are parts of my district that are affluent. Mm-hmm. I do not spend time, I don't spend time in I don't. And again, that for me is a much more of a triage mentality. It's not that I don't necessarily care, but it's sort of like, I'll get to your traffic light situation when these people have shelter. Like, I feel like you've just got to prioritize.
It reminds me of something that Lula said that, I'm going to paraphrase it and it won't be as beautiful, but, it's just like, it's like a mother sometimes spends time with the child who's, needs a little bit more help walking or moving around, not because they don't love the other children. And like, That's how Lula, thought about the country, which I always thought was a nice, way of putting it.
Because you care about the collective. That is the concept of somebody who cares about the collective. And anybody who's in those affluent, wealthy areas who also cares about the collective is okay with people prioritizing the least of these. So that's how you understand if people grasp the nature of collective, And that's why in other countries you see such better examples.
Well, Jen, I really appreciate, you taking some time and speaking with us. I know you mentioned it before, but where can people get more information?
So please check out the website. It's gen2024.org. and follow us. All of our social media platforms are on there. I think we're at Jen, FORFL 25, Jen for Flu 25 on our social media handles. And, you know, follow the campaign. We need support. We need donations. You know, I'm fighting a corporate monolith. It's not going to be easy. And, you know, there's definitely some people out there that do not want to see an anti-Zionist Jew in Congress. And it's somewhat threatening, I believe. I don't do so. I'm not on social media. People do that for me. Peter's handled it for me for years because the people are too mean. And so I thought the people were too mean a few years ago that I'm like, I just don't need this negativity in my headspace. So I got off. I honestly, I don't look now. I don't look now. I don't want to know now. I know I haven't gotten like an official threat. But yeah, the people are mean.
Yeah, it's difficult out there. Well, Jen, I really do appreciate you taking the time. It's always great chatting with you.
Good talking to you, Dave. Thank you.
Of course.
Bye.